We're now going to go to Delyth Rennie, and Delyth Rennie is, she started the new North Yorkshire Women's Rights Network group a number of years ago, and was then involved with the sports group and initiated the Park Run campaign, and actually did a presentation here on WDI on FQT about, because they said that men can say that they're women and be in the women's section of the running, so win the running. Sadly, since then, Parkrun has continued with their misogynistic policy. And Delyth attended an event on behalf of WDI on International Women's Day, which is what she's going to be talking about today. So thank you so much, Delyth, for coming, and over to you.
A few months ago, a friend who lives in Darlington in the north of England suggested holding an event on International Women's Day. So that's the 8th of March, to a group of us. And she managed to secure a council-owned building with a shop front in the centre of Darlington, and it's called Number 40. It's advertised as a safe space for everyone, of course. Its purpose is indeed laudable. In particular, it's open every Friday and Saturday night to provide help to people on late nights out. So it's a really good idea, you know, women who've become separated from their friends who are distressed and so on. So it is a laudable idea. It is council run, and it's joint funded by Darlington Borough Council, Durham Constabulary, and Durham Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. The organiser had been clear with the council that the emphasis was on women's sex-based rights. We were there with that leaflet and handing that out and talking to people about WDI and the declaration and the articles there. We were also promoting the most recent WDI campaign, which is about ending sex falsification. So there was 2 pages to that, actually. Sorry, I've only put 1 there. But it just summarises the longer campaign brief about ending sex falsification, which is clearly very damaging to women and women's rights. So we were there with those, speaking to, well, networking with other groups there, and also we went outside with leaflets and were handing them out to members of the public, and hopefully people in the middle of Darlington who had no idea about any of this stuff. So there were lots of other groups there, including Women's Rights Network, Let Women Speak, Party of Women, Conservatives for Women, LGB Labour, Labour Women's Declaration, Protect and Teach, the Free Speech Union, the Social Democratic Party, who are broadly in line. They do believe a bit in true trans, but they're part way there anyway. And I'm sure I've missed some. So we were a wide range of groups with different political views, but all of whom were broadly critical of gender identity ideology and pro women's sex-based rights. And it wasn't, it's important, it wasn't a female-only event, but it was mostly women who attended. The event was open to the public, and the organiser had invited councillors from across the political spectrum, although perhaps no prizes for guessing which party's councillors were a no-show. Yeah, well, Labour and the Greens for starters. So as well as handing out leaflets and talking to people, we canvassed opinions about single-sex spaces and collected messages of support for the Darlington nurses who have been forced to take legal action against their employer. Their NHS trust told them that they needed re-educating, really, because they refused to take their clothes off in front of a man who calls himself Rose and uses their female changing room with the trust's blessing, indeed. So for those of you in the UK, this is very similar to the Sandy Peggy case in NHS 5 Scotland, which is, well, only part heard and is going to be heard in July. And I think the Darlington nurses case is due in June, so that's going to be interesting. Anyway, the event was going well when an obviously angry man entered. This was alarming and upsetting to many of us. So a man, and he was accompanied by another man, stormed into an International Women's Day event. The organizer and the Let Women Speak rep were clearly expected to follow these men. And it turns out us individuals didn't know, but he was the premises manager. And the other man turned out to be another council employee. So this is what they were objecting to and found so beyond the pale, so offensive that, yeah, you'll see what happens next. Saying that women don't have a penis might obviously upset cross-dressing gynophiles or something, you know, and we don't want to do that.
Space for all on Friday, Saturday nights. Public sector equality duty requires us to foster good relations between all groups, and this isn't doing that, I'm afraid, so we'll have to ask you to leave.
Would you mind just showing me on the leaflet what it is in particular, that's just so we can sort of understand?
Non-binary is nonsense, transition children is profound abuse, no one has a penis, no one has a vagina.
Those are statements of fact, objective reality?
It's not objective reality.
What
Are you saying that a woman can have a penis?
I'm not saying that.
So
What I'm
what do you
saying is
object?
that is not a statement.
Can you just, I think you need
Can
to...
I answer your question?
I think you need to calm down a bit. I think you've come in very aggressively, and I think I need to remind you that it's actually International Women's Day, and actually your tone, and you look actually physically all hyped up, and I think you just need to take it down a notch, to be honest.
Okay, right, okay, I'll take it down. I'll relax. I'll show you how relaxed I am. There you go.
This is really
Right,
strange
I'm the least
behaviour.
aggressive person that Jim's probably ever met. I would like to answer the question you posed. I'm not disputing anything on here because that's not my job to dispute it. My job is to enforce the Equality Act, and the public sector duty says we have to foster good relations. Now, what you're saying on here, you might state as fact.
One of the groups is
You're
saying
not letting me
that,
answer. In the Equality Act, under the protected characteristics, it specifically states gender reassignment.
What about freedom of speech?
Again, you're not letting me finish. So if you're going to be aggressive, you're being the aggressive one.
Okay, I'm being aggressive.
Freedom of speech is fine, but when Darlington Borough Council are concerned, freedom of speech doesn't mean faultless speech. We have a duty under the Public Sector Equality Act, the Equality Act Public Sector duty, and we're going to unfortunately have to ask you to leave because this doesn't comply with what we do. The front space and this space is a space for everybody. And
Clearly not for women who want to voice their opinions. It's clearly not.
No, it's not about voicing your opinions. This is a safe space for people.
Is it a safe space for us?
It's a safe space for everybody, but not to voice those opinions.
Following this, obviously, the organiser had to tell us that we'd been told to leave. And in another clip, he'd said that we weren't welcome. So much for safe spaces. I can't see the irony anyway. Everybody agreed that we were not going to leave until the end of the event. We were staying. And so obviously she had to make us aware that he said, he'd also said that he would be calling the police if we didn't go. So what a depressingly familiar story indeed. So I've made an official complaint as an individual, which has been logged and is currently being investigated. And one of the responses I've had so far to let me know it's being logged and querying whether I was really there and so on, bizarre. There was little surprise to see pronouns in the signature of one of the communications, obviously. Many other individuals have complained, and organisations as well, including WDI, have lodged a formal complaint with the council as well. So I'll just read through my complaint and where I think they've got it so wrong, obviously. So I'm writing to make a personal official complaint of discrimination on the basis of the protected characteristics of sex and belief. By Darlington Borough Council at an event at number 40 on Skinnergate on 8/3/25 for International Women's Day. I attended this as a participant, and it was clear from the flyers prior to the event that women's sex-based rights and child safeguarding were the focus. It's likely you will have heard by now that a council representative asked us to leave despite being aware of the above. There are videos available on X of Andrew Allison's interactions with the organisers. It seems that another council employee, Jim Bone, took offence at a Let Women Speak leaflet that stated no woman has a penis, no man has a vagina, non-binary is nonsense, and transitioning children is profound abuse. I agree with these statements, although I was not with Let Women Speak on Saturday. I also understand there are people who do not agree with them, which I consider to be statements of fact, and that they are entitled to hold that belief. I do not consider these statements offensive, but I accept believers in gender identity ideology may find them offensive. Andrew Allison, who I understand manages Number 40, said the public sector equality duty requires us to foster good relations between all groups, and this doesn't do that, I'm afraid, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave. He said he had to enforce the Equality Act and cited gender reassignment as a protected characteristic, apparently disregarding other protected characteristics. He continued to say, saying the leaflet doesn't comply and the space is a space for safe space for everybody, and a safe space for everybody, but not to voice those opinions. The irony is apparently lost on him as he harasses, unlawfully discriminates, in my opinion, and has made the safe feel unsafe for everyone using it on International Women's Day. Mr. Allison does not seem to fully understand the public sector equality duty, but I consider this a council failure, as presumably his lack of understanding, prejudice, is due to insufficient training or indeed incorrect training, possibly provided by trans activist groups. And I say, please see the government explanation below about public sector equality duty. Public authorities are now required, in carrying out their functions, to have due regard to the need to achieve the objectives set out under Section 149 of the Equality Act 2010 to A, eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation, and any other conduct that is prohibited by or under the Equality Act 2010. B, advance equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. C, foster good relations between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. It is not lawful to promote one protected characteristic, gender reassignment, and give it precedence over all of the other characteristics, or indeed ignore the other characteristics. In exercising his authority on behalf of Darlington Borough Council, I consider he discriminated against me on the basis of sex and belief. I feel his conduct constituted harassment. His demeanour was aggressive and intimidating, and I wasn't having to deal directly with him. This was his behaviour entering the building. I would remind you this was International Women's Day, and that Mr. Allison himself repeatedly said Number 40 was a safe space for everyone. It certainly did not feel a safe space for those of us witnessing his obvious anger at an event centering women and child safeguarding. So, when Mr. Allison referenced the public sector equality duty demanding that we leave, he did so arguably in contravention of the public sector equality duty sections A and B. He completely disregarded or was unaware of these aspects of the PSED. You cannot do that. It isn't pick and choose. In relation to Section C, which he was citing, one needs to consider that freedom of expression may be considered offensive by someone simply because they don't agree with a particular statement. This is important. And then a quote, free speech includes not only the inoffensive, but the irritating, the contentious, the eccentric, the heretical, unwelcome, and the provocative, provided it does not tend to provoke violence. Freedom only to speak inoffensively is not worth having. And that was a case, Redmond Bate versus the DPP in 1999. And that was in the judgment. To be clear, Mr. Allison demanded we leave because one leaflet said no woman has a penis. On the basis of his colleague finding this offensive, he considered it contravened the public sector equality duty to foster good relations. On arrival at the venue, there were many so-called progress flags on display. I consider these extremely offensive, so I could equally argue they are a contravention of the public sector equality duty. The difference is that I don't think I have a right not to be offended. I don't like it, but I value free speech and freedom of expression. Furthermore, Mr. Allison said that as far as Darlington Borough Council are concerned, freedom of speech doesn't mean thoughtless speech. He said that in that clip. This is, of course, nonsense. It's not for Mr. Allison or Darlington Borough Council to determine if speech is thoughtless. And of course, I don't think the statements were thoughtless in any case. Even if the speech was thoughtless, one's right to speak isn't allowed because of how thoughtful you are. Speech is constrained by law. For example, incitement to violence, targeted harassment of an individual, or defamation are unlawful. The statements on the leaflet were not even in the foothills of the above, and that's from the Miller versus the College of Policing judgment. So, although I name Andrew Allison and Jim Bone because they were the men who were present and I perceived to be harassing us, I suspect that they may have been reciting Darlington Borough Council policy. If so, the council should review their policies and provisions in line with existing law. If the error lay solely with Mr. Allison and Mr. Bone, then the council's equality training needs to be revised to be compliant with the Equality Act and public sector equality duty as it is in law, not as they would wish it to be to suit their ideological prejudice. In conclusion, this is my personal complaint of discrimination and harassment in relation to the protected characteristics of sex and belief, in brackets, gender critical belief. I don't like the term, but we have to use it, by Darlington Borough Council on Saturday, the 8th of March, 2025. The council or its representatives, in my opinion, behaved unlawfully as it incorrectly exercised the public sector equality duty. So that's what happened on the 8th of March, in Darlington. And we didn't expect it.